Have you ever stopped to think about the fans behind a band? What is it about the music that keeps fans coming back for more? Or is there more? My name is Renae Lipsmeyer, and I am the host of this podcast, The Space Between Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. Each week, a fellow DMB fan joins the show to discuss their journey with the band. Welcome to the Space Between Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Space Between Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the Dave Matthews Band. The Dave Matthews Band is being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this October 2024, and we are so excited for our band. For me, again, I say this a lot, but it feels like my team is going to the Super Bowl. We've already won. We got the trophy now. I'm going to be there. So tickets went on sale today. If you were like a member or whatever of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which you just had to pay like $30. I have been a member for like 2 months, just long enough for like me to get these tickets. And I was like, I love you. I will pay the $30 for the early access. And so I get to be there. I'm super excited to talk about that. And so stay tuned. We'll talk more about that in the future and what the Space Between Podcast is going to be doing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So if this is your very first time to listen to this podcast, every episode I bring a fan of the Dave Matthews Band on to share their journey with how they found this band and why they continue to still listen to this music. So this episode is just like every episode. I have a fan of the Dave Matthews Band on to share his journey. And so, Alex, I am so excited that you're on the show. I just said your name and I didn't want to, but Alex is on the show. Alex, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about you. Like, what do you do outside of the Dave Matthews Band?
Yeah, my name is Alex Brandt. I currently live in Nashville, Tennessee. Been here about 10 years. Nashville's Music City, so a lot of my time around here is spent just going to shows, both local and, in the nearby cities. It's just one big thing that I definitely enjoy doing here. Another thing that fills my time is I go hiking quite a bit. There's some nice parks around, my neck of the woods near the Smoky Mountains.
There really is. Tennessee is gorgeous. I love Tennessee.
Yep. So, besides
we're like neighbors.
Work, yeah, we are just about.
I could get you.
I could get you what, like
Tennessee
5 or 6
and Arkansas.
hours.
It would be forever, but Tennessee and Arkansas, we're just neighbors. I just realized that.
Tennessee, it's a very long state, so
it is.
It takes a while to get from the east side to the west side. It takes a hot minute. But I again been living here 10 years, and outside of going to shows, enjoy hiking, hang out with my friends, breweries. Kind of some of the generic things.
Yeah, no, but all cool things. And I'm down to say every time, do whatever makes you happy. And if those things are what make you happy, then who are we to judge how, whatever it is, even if it is generic, it makes you happy and cool. I love it for you. So let's do it. Let's talk about the Dave Matthews Band. Where in the world did you meet this band?
So my first introduction to Dave Matthews Band would have come all the way, maybe not all the way back, but to 2002 when I was a lot younger, spending some time up with my family during the summer and watching VH1's Top 20 Countdown. It was the summer of 2002, and at that time, VH1's Top 20 Countdown, I think it was on every Saturday. So instead of watching Saturday cartoons, I was watching VH1, and it really became that moment in my life where I felt that my musical palette started to develop with my own taste. The show was playing like John Mayer, Jason Mraz, No Doubt, even System of a Down wound up on the Top 20 Countdown at some point. Blink-182, Creed, those were all kind of core memories for me as I was kind of listening to music for the first time that was music I liked or I was interested in, and not something that was being played, just by my parents as we're, driving around in the car or whatever that might be. So that was really my first introduction to them, because it was Where Are You Going? which was featured on the Mr. Deeds movie soundtrack. It made its
Oh,
way onto the VH1.
yes.
Yeah, it made its way onto the top
Totally
20
forgot about that.
countdown. And I remember thinking how cool it was that this band had a saxophone in it, because Leroy takes this wonderful sax solo in the middle of that song, and it just kind of stayed with me. And I just continued to watch that top 20 countdown every week for that whole summer, probably for maybe until about 2004. I remember just watching that every single
Wow.
week.
Dang. I mean, I remember, God, I miss like MTV and VH1 where they were playing music videos. And I mean, obviously we live in a time where those are just, I could go to YouTube and watch them anytime I want. But there was something, and maybe it's just nostalgic, like because that's what we did in our youth. But like, I miss that sweet time of discovering music in a very innocent way. And I mean, I feel like what you just said, as far as groups of musicians you kind of gravitated to, like in the beginning, dude, in my opinion, all very solid choices, all solid choices. But I can see like the musical influences of kind of like what you like. Like if you're listening to John Mayer, chances are you like the Dave Matthews Band, or at least a little portion of it, because those two things like kind of go together. And like how John Mayer even happened, right? Like he gives a lot of his credit to Dave Matthews and the Dave Matthews Band. And so it's so funny just like listening to you talk about who you listen to. I was like, okay, well, you had a certain taste of music, and I totally dig this. So you start digging into the Dave Matthews Band, like you find them on TV, or of course you identify them in a movie, which I just want to talk about that movie for a second. I'm such a big Adam Sandler fan. That movie, while I wouldn't consider it like the best ever Adam Sandler movie, there were so many amazing songs in that. And there, I mean, it's iconic. Like it was so different. It was so different just because Adam Sandler, I think that's a goal of his, is to make every movie that he ever does just completely different than what he's done before. But like, what was it next that kind of catapulted you into just continuing to follow them?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, after, that moment in my life, I didn't really go to a lot of shows. I just listened to
Sure.
music, whether I was in the car or, at a friend's house. It just wasn't really something that I was terribly interested in like going to concerts. I went to a few in
Right. Yeah.
2005. I went and saw Chevelle, Trapped, and Hoobastank in 2005.
Dang.
And after that,
Yeah.
I didn't go to any shows of anybody until about 2009. And I think it's important to note that while John Mayer and Dave Matthews Band were on that VH1 Top 20 Countdown and showing those music videos, it was actually some of the alternative and rock genres I was gravitating towards at that moment. But
Yeah.
as I was nearing the end of high school, I picked up an acoustic guitar and thought to myself, oh, like, I'm really enjoying this acoustic guitar. I don't have to plug it into an amplifier. My parents aren't getting upset over the fact that I'm just rocking out in the house. It's a little bit, it leans easy listening. I was like, who are some of the
Yes.
good acoustic guitar players that I could, kind of start listening to again? And I thought back to VH1. And I thought, oh, there was John Mayer and Jason Mraz and Dashboard Confessional and Dave Matthews Band. And so that was really the moment that I came back around to the other half of what that countdown was. And that was the acoustic
Yeah.
side. So that was probably where I really started listening to a lot of those types of musicians pretty
Mhm.
seriously. And then that led me to what became my first Dave Matthews Band show.
Yeah. So, okay, take us there. Take us back to the moment. So, what year would this have been? What was your first live show?
This was 2009 at Principal Park in
2009.
Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay. I think it's important just for those of you that are listening that really do kind of have a good sense of the decades of the Dave Matthews Band and just like the different sounds and even to the point of like who was in the band at that moment. That's why I ask you like when that was, just so like those of you that are listening can paint that picture in your head of like, okay, that's what he went into. Because there's been a progression obviously since 2009, some changes. Um, so, take us back to that first show. Like, who were you with? Where were you? I think that's important. Like, Not necessarily just to paint us the picture, right? But like, and what was it like for you? Because people often say listening to them or seeing them on TV and then seeing them before your eyes is just like a totally different day and night situation.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Rich from the Eddie Casino Band out in Las Vegas. We're really excited to get this journey going, celebrating our music, our original music, on all platforms. We just released our first single over Labor Day weekend called Eddie Casino. If you're looking for new music, look out for our next single coming out to Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Music. These guys in the band are really excited to get started playing music for you all. If you like Tom Petty, Zach Brown, Jason Mraz, Dave Matthews Band, Rob Thomas, Jimmy Buffett, Pink Floyd, Stapleton, Bare Naked Ladies, Goose, Billy Strings, Sting and the Police, a ton of influences that we bring to the table. Hope you enjoy our music and look forward to seeing you soon live on stage.
Yeah, 2009 was a really important year for me in just seeing live music. It really starts with Blink-182, who I saw in Omaha, Nebraska in August of 2009. I was just getting ready. This is going to, give everyone what my age is. I was getting ready to go to college in 2009, and I was a really big fan of Blink-182. And Blink-182 had announced that they were getting back together for the first time with their kind of core three members. And I thought to myself, I haven't been to a concert since 2005, but man, I really need to go see this Blink-182 show. And
Yeah.
as the band started teasing their live show and what songs might become on the set list, I became really obsessed with what songs from their catalog were going to make the cut for their reunion tour. And so there I
Yeah.
was, about 18 years old, going to see Blink-182 in 2009. And that moment just totally, you know, redirected my perspective of live music and just what that felt like. And so fast forward
Mhm.
to college, now we're September of 2009. And I texted a buddy because again, I'd had so much fun at that Blink-182 show. I said, "Hey man, like, do you have an extra ticket to Dave Matthews Band at Principal Park?" And just by chance, he had an extra ticket. And it was,
No way.
Principal Park is the baseball field where our AAA ball team, the Iowa Cubs, play. And it was on the field,
Okay.
so general admission. It was a warehouse ticket. I didn't know really what any of that meant, but we
Sure,
went
of
to the
course.
show, drove down from our university, and got about 10th row back from the stage in the outfield. And but shows ran about 2.5 3 hours, no intermission, and I thought this is insane. This is acoustic music, and here we are rocking out to this. And I had done a little bit of homework on what songs maybe I liked or what songs I wanted to hear, but not too much. I mean, Where Are You Going? Because I first heard it back in
Yes.
2002, Crash. Weirdly enough, I was a big fan of Idea of You, Crush. So
Yeah.
those were kind of the songs I was hoping to hear when I went into the show. And of course, The Space Between. I was hoping to hear that song
I mean,
as
it's a
well.
great song.
It is. They played Crash and they played Crush that night, and those were really the two songs that I remember singing along to and really latching on to as far as
Yeah.
songs I wanted to hear and getting the songs that you went to a concert to see. And funny enough, at that
Right.
time in my life, I thought that you really only go to see a band once. Like once you've seen them, you've seen them. It didn't really
Right.
even occur to me that you could go see a band like more than one time,
Yeah,
which
I
is
don't think it
hilarious.
occurs to most people. I think that's
Yeah, like
normal. I think that's very normal.
it's that band that comes into your city, you go and see them,
Hmm.
and then they're off to the next. And those folks in the Chicago market then get to enjoy it. And then the folks in
Yeah.
the Indianapolis market get to enjoy it. And it just
Right.
was, I felt that you had to wait for the band to come to you. And I grew up in the state of Iowa, so we have to be very patient with tours and who comes to town. It was the
I
first
feel you.
time
I'm in
that,
Arkansas.
right.
I feel
So it was the
you.
first time that Dave Matthews Band had played a full band show, I think since 1994. So it had been, quick math, it had been about,
Wow.
15 years since the band had a show in Des Moines, Iowa.
Wow. Wow. Oh my God. I mean, that's way too long, right? Like that's way too long. So what does Iowa get a lot of, I mean, I don't think I remember in the last several years that I've been really paying attention that Iowa has gotten any shows to, am I right on that? Do
Yeah,
they visit?
you're spot on. It was the show in 2009, which was my first show. It
Okay.
was 2015, and then they came back in 2019. And I don't think there's been another
Wow.
show in Des Moines since then.
It's so interesting just like thinking about those things like I'm totally into that nerdy kind of stuff of like I'm sure that there's some kind of data that tells them like where their most exposure is or where like they'll do certain things that they need to do in order to do all the things that a band needs to do and like what states serve them best and what areas serve them best. Like I would totally dig to know what their information is on that. Because that's somebody's job, right? Like I
Oh,
think.
totally. And you notice
Yeah.
when tours will, obviously we've got the tour stops that are getting hit every single year, but if you really pay attention, there are some stops that seem to alternate, or occasionally they'll
Hmm.
throw one of the smaller markets a bone, and
Thank God.
get some of those, like I think of like
Thank you.
Omaha and Des Moines, and sometimes maybe like Minneapolis. Like they don't get a lot of shows, but every once in a while
No.
they'll get one creeping up their way.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. It's so crazy. So, first show, I want to go back to it because I think it's just so important. Like, obviously, it's the first, right? So, had you listened to a lot of live tracks, if you will, before your first show? Did you know about like the extended versions, about the jam part of it? Like, were you prepared for that?
I was prepared for the jam element just from what I had heard on the Fenway '06 album. The same friend who had the extra ticket loaned me his copy of Fenway '06 to kind of get acquainted to the live setting. And
Yeah.
but outside of Fenway and just the music that was playing like in the car with my friends, or the music that they were playing in the dorm rooms, that was really all I had. But that
Yeah.
Fenway album I got to know pretty well, just because it was the only hard piece of media that I had that was for a live show. And
Right.
yeah, I spent a lot of time with that one. The Idea of You on Fenway '06 is so good. And the song was new at the time, and it really stuck. Oh my gosh, it stuck out to me. And
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to hear that song so bad, my first show. So a lot of the '06 songs I've got a special place in my heart for.
Yes. I feel like I need to take notes too as you talk because I'm like, oh, okay, you just gave me some homework. And I totally dig Dave Matthews Band homework. I'm like, oh, check out this version. I'm like, hold on, let me write this shit down because I don't want to forget, right? Like you get
Yeah.
my total attention when you start talking about things that I'm not necessarily familiar with. And I love that song. I think it's an amazing song in general. But if you say that there's an ultimate version out there, I'm after it. So thank you for the homework, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I might have to listen to it today just to get a little bit of
Yeah,
nostalgia back in my life.
for sure. It's so good. It's so good. So let's move on. Like first concert, you leave there, and do you remember what your thoughts were? You like, I got to do this again, or did that kind of cool off for a little while, and you just kind of go back to living life? Because like that's normal. Like that's a very normal situation to not just like dive in after the first one. But what did it take? Because we know that you dove in at some point. So what does it look like after concert one?
Yeah, after concert one, I went home, went back to school, and we kept listening to the band, but it was at the same level it was before. I had Big Whiskey, I had Fenway, and those albums were on rotation, but I had other bands I was still listening to, and there were some local shows like at college that we would go see, but it never really occurred to me that I would
Mhm.
go see the band again anytime soon. Um,
Yeah.
that and the show in Des Moines was in September, and so the tour was wrapping up. It wasn't like there
Oh,
were
yeah.
more shows in the Midwest that my friends and I could,
Right.
talk about going to. It was kind of the end of the tour. So it
Right.
became the off season right after I saw my first show. And we're
Gotcha.
talking after the Gorge. It was September 25th. So it took
Gotcha.
until the following summer with the 2010 summer tour announcement where things really started to get ramped up for me.
What's up, everybody? This is David with the Dave Matthews Tribute Band. We're a nationally touring tribute to DMB, playing shows all over the country and beyond. Our goal is to bring you back to the classic sound that you fell in love with in the 90s and the 2000s, featuring a violin, saxophone, and maybe some keyboards sprinkled in as well. You can find out information about all of our tours and shows by visiting thedmtb.com. You can also check us out on Facebook and Instagram and other socials by searching the Dave Matthews Tribute Band or the DMTB. Hope to see you on the road and enjoy the Space Between podcast.
How did you catch on? Like, how, back, I'm trying to try to place myself in 2010. While I'd like to admit that that wasn't that long ago, it was actually 14 years ago. And so I'm trying to remember like technology and what exactly we were doing to get information. But like, how did you find out? Do you remember how you found out that they were even coming back on tour? Like, what grabbed your attention to go, oh, hey, yeah, I'd kind of like to do that again.
Yeah, I think you would describe it as just word of mouth because
Gotcha.
same friend who had the extra ticket to the Des Moines show, he came by and said, "Hey, Alex, Dave Matthews Band is playing at Alpine Valley. A lot of our friends are going up. Like, would it be something you're interested in doing?" We would just have lawn tickets. So it's $40 per ticket. It's 2 nights, no repeats. He gave me the whole spiel. And obviously, it's my freshman summer, I guess, or going into my sophomore year. And I'm like, yeah, I need to fill my time up with some fun. Let's go up to
Yes.
Alpine Valley. It's July 4th, 2010. Let's ride up together. So 2 cars, I think about 8 guys riding up to Alpine Valley for that pair of shows. And it was a really special time being out in another outdoor amphitheater. I wasn't familiar with Alpine at all. I'd never even seen photos of it. And to walk into this vast space that's, almost 40,000 people strong was something I'd never experienced. And, for those that have been there, they're familiar with what that tailgate scene is like and what it's like just meandering around those parking lots before the show. I felt like I was hot shit going to my second show. I was like, oh yeah, I saw this band last year. Like, this is great. I'm a veteran now. And, I'm being naive, but I know now, I mean, I'm walking around people that have probably seen, 50 plus shows back then.
Dude, I know it's
But
the numbers are wild.
seeing a band, twice in 2 years or 3 times in 2 years, I was like, I'm locked in. And I didn't really
Yes.
touch on it, but leading up to Alpine Valley, I did really dive into the band's catalog. I went to Half Price Books and bought every single album that they had, and I would go back every week to see if I could get something new. And that was when I was introduced to the DMB Almanac and really paid attention to the summer 2010 tour and what songs were in rotation and what songs were getting tour debuts. That's when Best What's Around became my favorite song. And it was a really special time in my life to just dive into a catalog like I'd never done before and really paid attention to the trends. There was never a band that had interchangeable set lists that I had paid attention to. Blink-182 went on their reunion tour and pretty much played the same set for the whole year. And here I was on a nightly basis following a band who was playing different songs every night with a catalog that I was truly enjoying.
Right.
So I went into Alpine like with high hopes of what songs I might hear. Say Goodbye, Best of What's Around. Obviously, I still wanted to hear Idea of You. I mean, there were just some of these. The Stone, there were a lot of songs that I really wanted to hear going into Alpine 2010 that I didn't even know, honestly, I didn't even know existed when I went to my very first show.
Right.
So it was.
Well, and so I'm Alpine as your second one I mean, it's all about your geography, right? It's all in like where you're from and what you're close to, because, I am just like Alpine at a second concert. How lucky are you? But like people that live there, they almost don't know any better. I hope they know that they have such a gym and that the band loves to play there. And I think it's so cool to like, for me being in the South and you too, like we vacation in the summer in Wisconsin at a ski resort. Like it sounds like the craziest thing because it is, but like also it just makes everything that much better is just to be in like this weird, interesting space. And where the cheese is really as good as everybody says it is, and the beer is even better. And I'm not even a beer drinker, but like you had to try it because from the moment you cross over the lines, they're basically like spotted cow, spotted cow, spotted cow, spotted cow, and like you can only get it there. And so just like being there, Wisconsin's a special state. I had not been exposed to it before the Dave Matthews Band, so it's a great state. I mean, what a way to go to your second show and third, I guess. Your second and third.
Looking back, it was only my second trip to Wisconsin. And so hopping in a car with your buddies and kind of driving into the unknown and having an experience like you've never had before was so memorable. And I was pretty hooked after that point. Some folks may remember that it was around the Alpine Valley shows that they announced the Wrigley Field shows later that summer. And I had such a good time at Alpine. I thought, you know what? School have just started back up, but it's a weekend. I'm going to go to Wrigley Field, and I don't care what it takes to get me there. I'm going. So that was the weekend where I definitely got to know like what the community was really about and what the fan base was about. Because hanging out with your 8 buddies at Alpine Valley, that's one thing, but to use someone's warehouse account to get pit tickets or field tickets to Wrigley Field. And bring a chair and camp out in that line and figure it out. It was all foreign to me, but I was so hooked that I made sure that I was going to be on the rail for Wrigley Field. And so night 2, I had that warehouse ticket and was able to get on the rail for Wrigley night 2 and spent a lot of time with just different fans in that line and really got to know the fan base as a whole in that sense. So those 2 shows, Alpine plus Wrigley Field, then really just changed my whole, just again, perspective of live music and what a fan community that enjoys following a band from stop to stop can really, be about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole community, and I definitely want to dig into that in just a little bit. But I mean, I have to talk about Wrigley Field. Like, if you're not super familiar with the work of the Dave Matthews Band, I love that so much because you have so much to dig into, and I love finding people that don't know a lot about the band because that's just an opportunity for me to like give them some homework. But Wrigley Field is one of those. For me, I guess in my opinion, it's one of those things that I have listened to that I was not there. But it's like if I have to name best live version of You Might Die Trying, 100% goes there every single time. Every time I listen to it, it gives me goosebumps. The way he gets so excited. And I always tell people, I'm like, the last 3 minutes of that song will give you the energy for the day. Like he gave it everything. And he does so many times, but it just sounds so different in that version. So I cannot imagine like to be standing there, like right at the stage. And this is concert 4 for you.
That was number 4 and number 5.
So lucky. So crazy. So, I mean, talk about that show. Yeah. Tell us a little about it.
Obviously, it's a long day. There was no lottery system back then. So you're getting there first come, first serve warehouse line. And it's a long day. There's no other way to say it. And finally you get let in. I had no interest in going to the concessions. Luckily they had outdoor merch. So I had that all taken care of. You're just planted in your spot, but there was such an energy in that place. And just for the band coming back to Chicago, they had played Tinley Park leading up to those shows, but they had not had a proper show in Chicago for a very long time. And it was great having them back in the heart of the city. And it was fun to just be able to walk around Wrigleyville and see other fans and just kind of feel that vibe that was being brought to that part of town because the band was here. And, Wrigley Field being such a historic ballpark as well, band's first time being there was just an amazing atmosphere running up to there. And again, my first show was where the Iowa Cubs play. So now I had my fourth and fifth show where the Chicago Cubs play. And I was like, am I really just going to keep going to baseball stadiums to see Dave Matthews Band? I've been listening to Fenway and now I'm at Wrigley. And so for me, it was just baseball fields and Dave Matthews Band became, one and the same almost. But if people may remember that at the time of the Wrigley Field shows, the fall 2010 tour had been announced, but the band had been on record saying that they were going to take a break in 2011. And so I had no plans to go to the fall tour. I thought about maybe going to Charlottesville, but it wasn't in the cards for me. And I don't know. I didn't talk to a lot of people about the fall tour looking back on it, but I remember people just being kind of sad that the summer portion of the 2010 tour was wrapping up. Fall tours don't happen every year. Summer tours, for the most part, happen every year. And so seeing that chapter close at Wrigley Field was an emotional night for a lot of people, even for those who had tickets to fall tour later on. And I've got a random fun fact here I'll throw out. I don't have the exact number.
Yes, please.
I was on antsmarching.org and I asked those guys, there's a function where you can click like I am going to the show and you can see kind of where everybody's traveling from. I asked, what is the largest amount of like ants who have ever clicked the I am going or I was at this show button? And they confirmed that Wrigley Night 2 is the most attended antsmarching.org user show in the band's history. I thought that was really interesting. The fan base really came out to that one, no matter where they were located in the States or even in the world.
Yeah. And that makes sense though, because people were about to lose something at least for a year. And then you worry like if a year turns into two or, because at that point they had been playing even still for a while, as far as longevity from 91. But I think that fear sets in. And what I do know about the Dave Matthews Band is that we fear that a lot, right? Like, because as someone once said on this podcast, we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning. And so people don't like to talk about that. And so just because we're so close and we're, because we are closer to the end than to the beginning, I can feel that sense like they must have had just then of just that fear of like, well, I don't know, like, what are we going to do next year? And what are we going to do without the music? And so it surprises me none that was the most attended show at all, because I think we really do fear that. We think about that, like, what are we going to do with our lives? Like, what are we going to do?
We're terribly spoiled in the amount of shows that we are able to attend. And, there's certainly inevitably going to be a shock factor when they do scale back, whether it's just shorter tours, picking and choosing what markets they might be playing in versus like running a whole, I don't know, 35, 40 date summer tour. So it'll be a change for sure.
It will be. And, we'll see what that looks like. Hopefully it is a dwindling down situation. But, let's not dwell on that because that's not happening right now. I feel like the boys are on the move, and I mean, God, they've been on the move. Like I said, last episode, they're like a train on crack. They're just going and going and going, and they haven't stopped. And so, I'm excited that the month of August gives them some time to breathe, some time to connect with their families, and be in the spaces that they want to be in the space between their performances. I got to sneak it in where I can, Alex, right? I got to sneak it in where I can. So I want to dig more into it because I want to dig into like your TikToks. Guys, if you are not following Alex on social media, he is one of the dudes that always has all of the information about all the things, and if he doesn't have the information, he knows the person that does have the information. So if you're on TikTok, you've definitely so I want you to plug yourself, Alex. What can someone do if they want to find you on TikTok?
I think I'm pretty easy to find. If you go into TikTok and even search Dave Matthews Band, it will be the band's official account and probably my face right below that.
Yeah.
But my handle it's Alex M. Brandt. M as in Michael, so just my full name, Alex M. Brandt there. And yeah, the TikTok element of my life has been pretty fun. I really started doing that, trying to be consistent with it, I think in 2022, maybe December 2021. And it's just been something that I enjoy doing pretty much right before I walk out the door to get in my car and drive to my job. Just something quick to fill my time. It's fun to do. It keeps me really plugged into like the tour and what is happening in real time. I try to keep up with the tour. There's so many shows and I only have so much time. It can be tricky at moments.
Right.
But yeah, to talk about how I got into doing, I guess, Dave Matthews Band TikToks was basically on TikTok, you can search hashtags. And this was probably around the end of 2021. And I had searched Dave Matthews Band in TikTok, and there was maybe only 6,000 hashtags that had happened. And I thought that's so weird because there are other hashtags like Taylor Swift that have 3.3 billion tags. I was just like, this is so strange to me. That might be an exaggeration, but it's massive on that platform.
Right. No,
so
of course, yes.
Me that there's no Dave Matthews Band TikTok presence. And as you learn about social media, it's just about finding something that you can talk about a lot. And maybe there's not something that already exists in that world. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just going to dedicate my TikTok account to Dave Matthews Band. And I can talk about other shows and other music too, but the band deserves to have a voice on the platform. And there really wasn't anything there. So I just kind of made it my move to go ahead and start making TikToks about Dave Matthews Band. So hashtag DMB, hashtag Dave Matthews, hashtag Dave Matthews Band. I mean, I wanted to get those numbers up. I wanted to get it up from, 6,000 or whatever it was to the Taylor Swift levels. And maybe,
yes, let's go.
Yeah. And then maybe inspire some people along the way. So it's been fun to do. And, I'm going to keep doing it. As long as the band is touring, I'll keep doing my little set list reviews. And during the off season, I've got to get a little more creative on what I post, but it's been an absolute blast. And it's been great to have that in my life, which has allowed me to connect with folks like you and a lot of other folks in the community that, maybe we'd be at the same show, but maybe we wouldn't know each other. It just is fun to be able to connect with people on a whole new level now that I've been, just sharing my story or just sharing random stats on the Clock app, as they say.
Right. On the Clock, get TikTok. Well, I mean, social media is one of those things that really has brought so many people together. And, when people wonder, like, how is it that you meet these people? You just like show up at concerts and you just talk to someone. And I'm like, yeah, well, there are definitely some elements of that for sure. But where those, connections can first be kind of formed or made, or even just like some dots out there to people that like similar things, is through social media. There's so many different ways you can connect with fans, whether you're on Facebook. Of course, Facebook allows us to have multiple different ways, whether that be in private groups or public groups or pages or chat groups. Like there's so many different ways you can look for a thing. And I think that Facebook probably has the strongest when it comes into the community realm,
Definitely.
just because Instagram and TikTok aren't really built that way, but Facebook is built more for those communities to become. And I think that even Facebook used to have a commercial about those communities, about those groups, about finding people with similar interest. And so that's been super helpful for digging into like, well, God, is anybody else in Arkansas listening to the Dave Matthews Band? Well, matter of fact, there wasn't an Arkansas group. So I started one, right? But then like all these other states had one. And I'm kind of like you. I'm like, well, if there's not one, I'll be the girl that just like, boop, you know, and it took off, right? And like someone else is managing that now, thank God. So definitely check out the Arkansas group. But because thank God Dave Matthews Band comes here like every other year. So I'm expecting it in 2025. Fingers are crossed. But, you know, Instagram there are definitely so many accounts that you can follow. I mean, some hilarious ones. Like one of my most favorite to follow is just simply, I think, called DMB memes. And they're constantly making Dave Matthews Band memes based on, and they stay very relevant, like on top of whatever is about to happen or whatever just happened, like whatever kind of the rumble is. So they do a good job of coming up with content, and I love to laugh. And so they're like one of my favorites. So shout out to them. And then you have TikTok. And so that's where you can really kind of drill down even more on like, I want to see videos of people doing funny things or serious things going live, but all they're really kind of focusing on is Dave Matthews Band or Taylor Swift or people with blue cars. Like how specific do you want to go? Because it really can drill down that far. So, you know, it has been really easy, or life technology has made it very easy to connect with others. And I dig that. Like so many people don't necessarily are not big fans of social media or kind of frown upon it. And there are bad elements to every single thing. You know, even Benadryl can be a bad deal if you take a whole bottle of it. Like it's all like got to be educated and it's in proportion and like, but I think that social media, especially after COVID or especially during COVID, allows us to make so many connections because that's all we had. Like really, as far as connecting with other people, that's all we had was the internet and social media. And that's how we were interacting and doing Zoom meetings with people, is like, we just really, the online presence of the fans, while there has always been one when it comes to the Dave Matthews Band, and I encourage people to dig into the history of like those first chat groups and all of the fun things. But you know, it really has evolved, and so anybody on any level of social media can find communities within this band, with any other bands, and I think that's really important. I think it's just important to have a sense of community in general, and I think a lot of people have found whatever it is that they needed, whether that was support or love or just someone to grieve with, or like everybody has something outside of the Dave Matthews Band, but like the one thing we have in common that we know already is the Dave Matthews Band. So there's a lot of comfort in just knowing, well, hey, he knows a lot about this. I can talk to him about this. And so then it kind of takes that weirdness away. So that's how these connections have started and how these communities have grown. So that may sound crazy if you're listening to this going, she's drank the Kool-Aid, she's in a cult. Well, I know the definition of that, and that is not true. So we have just met people with similar interests, and you know, we're having a great time doing it. So let's dig into your side of the community. Like, you know, outside of TikTok, I know that you have had the opportunity to meet so many people from like Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And so how has that kind of creeped into your life, and how has it shifted it in either good ways? I'm sure it's good ways, but if it's negative, you can talk about that too. But like, but like, what has it done in your life just to have that community inside the music that you already loved?
Overall, everything's been so positive. I don't know what I was doing during like quarantine where I was missing out on the groups or what the community was really doing at that time. I remember I watched all of Dragon Ball Z during the quarantine part of the pandemic. So when I watched the drive-in series too, but I did notice, you know, around the time that we all made our way out to Raleigh in 2021, that there did just seem to be this rebirth of the fan base, and people were just really plugged in a way that I didn't necessarily feel back in 2019 or those couple shows they played in 2020. So
Yeah.
it was great coming out of, that time period and just seeing everybody really reinvigorated with the tour and the band felt the same way. So
Yeah.
I have just loved watching so many different people kind of find their own lane of what it is to be on the internet, like talking about Dave Matthews Band or posting about Dave Matthews Band or building a community around a group that is featuring Dave Matthews Band. There was so much just in the last few years that's really come out and has made, I think, hopefully everyone will agree with this, but the fan base has just been in a really great spot. And I do
Yeah.
feel that there's been just a lot of great avenues for people to enjoy the music in ways that aren't necessarily only listening to the music or just
Mhm.
going to the shows. It's been fun to have the band kind of plug back into my life in almost all aspects of my life versus just listening to them in the car and waiting for those summer tour dates to roll around. I've always been in, group texts with friends talking about the shows and what the band is up to. But when you get outside of those small group chats, there's a whole fan base of people that are talking about this band and really diving into what is happening within the community and the fan base. And it's unlike currently right now, it's unlike anything I've ever seen in the last 15 years of paying attention to what the fan base is doing. It's been great watching the beginning of Facebook groups around the time of Wrigley Field. I joined some Facebook groups, and then over time that kind of turned into a little bit of Twitter, and then that turned into Instagram. And now the hope is that it can go from Instagram and live on TikTok a little bit. There's been this
Yeah.
app progression where the fans have
Yes.
really gravitated towards a different, part of the internet where they can really digest the band. And it's fun to have a very small part in that. And I've had young people, like we're talking, I guess, Gen Z, come up to me at shows and say, man, I watch all of your TikToks. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your TikToks. I've had people come up and say that
Wow.
to me. And
Wow.
when I started making videos, that was never something that occurred to me. I really felt like
Yeah.
I was doing it for the people that were already established and really well educated about the catalog. But to have
Yeah.
the impact on getting young people, much younger than me, going to shows and then, even saying hello to me while I'm walking around the concourse of an amphitheater was like, I never intended that to happen. But what a cool
Mm.
moment to know that there
Yeah.
are people still finding the band. There are people still
Yes.
finding the music and connecting with it and then buying the ticket to go to the show. That's some major stuff.
It is. It is. And I feel like there's a sense of response. This sounds so crazy, and maybe it's just my opinion again, but I feel such a sense of responsibility to push this music on past me, right? Because it even took that for, everyone that's living and breathing has probably heard of the Beatles, right? Like that's a band that has always had a name. But if you think about it, they didn't play that long, and they played in like it was really a long time ago, but everyone still knows about them because they're fans, and the fans' children and the fans' children like knew about it because it played such a big impact in their life. So that kind of went on. And of course there's the iconic songs that like helped us get through things. But like it's our responsibility with the Dave Matthews Band is to continue to remind people about the music, and the way we have to do that to reach the most people is to be where the younger generations are going. And TikTok is it right now. Snapchat, all of those fun things. And it's so hard. Like, it's hard for anybody to find time to be on like 5 or 6 different platforms and juggle all of the information. But, you can hone in on one because there really is information on all of them, and it's all good information. It's all presented in a very different way. So I'm so thankful for you and how you kind of like poured into the community. And because ultimately that takes time away from whatever else that you would want to do. But I know that this is what you want to do. So that makes it even better. But definitely, guys, if you're listening to this, check out his TikTok. It's so much fun. I mean, I know that when I turn my TikTok on, you're usually like the first person in my feed. So it's just like, good morning from Alex every morning. You know? It's so much fun. But because of TikTok, you know, obviously, yeah, you talked about you've got to meet a lot of people, part of the communities, but that's also allowed you to be on some other podcasts. And so let's talk about that because, you know, you've heard me say before, if you've listened to this, I am far from the only podcast that talks about the Dave Matthews Band. There are several out there, and I encourage you to listen to all of them, and we'll name all of those because I think Alex has maybe been on all of them at this point.
No, not all of them.
But we'll name those for you because, of course, podcast is another way to get information. And again, with podcasts, you could drill down how specific you want to get. Very, very specific. There's podcasts about everything. And so, but that also kind of makes me sad because I can think of that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's no more than 5 podcasts specifically about the Dave Matthews Band
that are active right now.
Yeah.
You,
and I don't even know.
Posters, Jane, Gray Street. I know Ants used to do a podcast. So
yeah.
They've been kind of silent for a bit, but 4, maybe 5. If I'm missing any, let me know because I do my best to listen to every episode of every single one.
Me too. I'm a big fan of all of them. So definitely, guys, if you haven't checked those out, let me say, I know we kind of just randomly went through the names. So there's the pod that Jane likes. It's hosted by 4 people. Alex, you've been on that show. Tell us a little bit about it and like what their format's like. If someone's never heard of that podcast before, like tell me kind of, if someone tunes in, like what are they going to hear about the Dave Matthews Band?
I actually haven't been on Pod That Jane Likes, but I have been to both of their. Well, I've been to both of their like live events. They did one in New York before MSG Night 2 last year, and then they just did one before Night 2 of SPAC. And you know, both of those were super engaging with the audience. They had special guests, Ari Fink at MSG and Rodrigo,
super cool.
right? On SPAC night. So they've had special guests at both of those. They do a really good job of kind of covering all of the shows that are taking place, and then also doing a good job of diving in on just general Dave Matthews Band news that's coming out in real time. And I go to them, and every time they drop an episode, it's one of the first things I'll plug in as I'm driving to work or wherever I may be going. Great people too. A lot of great perspectives. One thing I like about that podcast is their different perspectives from all the different hosts. And
me too.
Both from like just the fandom side and what's happening like in what the fans are really feeling or talking about. And then you've got kind of the analytical side that's talking about sets and different statistics. So no matter what really interests you within the DMB world, there's something for you there.
True. And then, of course, there's the Corner of Gray Street is hosted by 2 guys who've been, I think it is the oldest Dave Matthews Band podcast. I may be wrong on that statistic, but that's why I don't do statistics on this podcast because I'd be terrible at it. So, but they've been around for a while, and you were on their show.
I was on their show. They started in 2019, I think. And they were able to, you know, provide content, long form content to everybody during the pandemic. And I didn't really start listening to them until we were gearing up for the Raleigh show, just to kind of get me back in that fandom state of mind. But ever since then, I've listened to every single episode. I went back and listened to every single episode of theirs. They've had some incredible guests on. One of my favorite artists, Rustin Kelly, he was a guest on their podcast because he was gearing up to open for DMB at the Gorge in 2021. They had Corey Wong, Bell Fleck. I'm blanking now. Steve Lillywhite. They had Steve Lillywhite on their podcast.
They did, which So
It's
crazy.
really an insane get as far as guests go.
Right?
Producer
Like, I wonder
for
that process. I want to know, like, did you just call him up? How'd you get the number? Like, how did all of that work?
tell us how the connection was made. No, it's really
Yeah.
incredible with the guests that they've been able to get, and it's really provided a lot of insight into some of the inner workings of the band and maybe what was going on internally at that time period, like when a guy like Steve was, working with them every day on a new album.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then of course we have posters in every direction, which is going, if you haven't heard of them, I love talking about them because almost every time I interview someone, they have posters, the Dave Matthews Band posters behind them. And of course, Alex, you showed up and you did it too. I love it because that prompts me to I want to see every single poster you have behind you. And if you can't see, that's probably because you're listening to this on a podcast app. So just know that you can go over to YouTube anytime, go to the Space Between podcast, and you can watch almost all of my episodes. And honestly, there's a lot of them at this point. So, but I want you to see Alex posters. It's funny because more often than not, one of the posters that is behind everyone is the Raleigh 2021 poster. I mean, it's up on every wall because that show meant so much, just like you said. And I mean, it really was, it was a lot to a lot of people. I mean, I remember the feeling of being there and the tears. I mean, for real. And Dave cried. It was just this whole vibe. And I totally dug it. And I'll never forget it. And I'll never take this poster off my wall. I love it. So the posters in every direction is just that they break down different posters from the Dave Matthews Band. They often have guests on who were the artist of the poster, which is just mind blowing in itself. And so they get to share things like little Easter eggs that may be dropped into that art. And so definitely check out posters in every direction. Have I named them all, Alex? What am I missing? I don't want to forget anyone.
Yeah, you covered them all. I mean,
Yay!
antsmarching.org, they did their podcast. It dates back to almost 2008. I could be wrong there,
Wow.
but they did a whole episode dedicated to Leroy Moore around the time that he passed, which if you ever
I gotta
have
go back and listen to that.
you can go back and listen to that. I was driving down to Nashville from Des Moines, Iowa once and just listened to all of these archived episodes of Ants Marching and just a timestamp of what was going on again, within the fan base at that time was really an interesting deep dive. So I know they've come off, but they were doing it a long time ago. I feel like I got on the podcast train just as a listener early because of their podcast happening. So shout out to those guys too. Maybe one day they'll come out of retirement.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So much good content. But, I think about just those numbers too. And in the podcast world, the representation of the Dave Matthews Band is not there. And so it's just looking at those numbers, kind of like what you did when you got on TikTok. And I'm not necessarily saying there needs to be more, but there's room for growth, but there's also just room for how are we getting this information out there? Is this information getting out there? I have to say that I think it was honestly Instagram. It was something that was, Instagram's pretty big. So I went to Instagram to see how many followers the Dave Matthews Band had. And I was kind of astonished by the number. It's not as big as what I thought it would be. And that was just shocking to me as well. Just, we've just got to continue doing what we're doing. Alex, you've got to continue. So what you're doing now, you can't stop because it's so important. And it's so important to us, right? Just the documentation. Well, no, it's important. It's documentation. And that is how documentation is done now, because this information will be available for what we know for forever. And so it can always be found with just those hashtags or just those searches of TikToks about Dave Matthews Band. I'm sure you could just Google that and boom, your face is going to pop up on their Google search. And so, just making sure that it's out there for future generations, because I feel like the messages that they have, even though they're just beautiful musicians as far as the instruments that they play, the lyrics that they have also accompanied that beautiful music to are really important to remember and really important to dig into and really important to just not forget. And so thanks for helping this community make sure that this time is documented, because you know what? Like I said, I keep saying we're closer to the end than to the beginning. And so I think keep saying that because I'm like preparing my heart because I know it's going to be broken. I think that's what I'm doing. I don't know. But tell us, go ahead. No, wait, before we go, I definitely want to talk about your posters. So let's definitely fit in time for that. But go ahead with what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, this is such a great year for the band with the Rock Hall induction happening. Off air with the guys at Gray Street, I basically said all roads lead to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's just been a fun year to kind of celebrate the band and celebrate the achievement. I'm planning on being there, so I'll look out for you once we get to Cleveland.
Sure.
But
yeah,
it's a great moment to be a fan. It's a great time to be a Dave Matthews Band fan. I'm so glad that, we don't really get the Grammy love, but here we are getting the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame love. And it's going to be so fun to get out there and just celebrate the band. All the shows that I'm going to, regardless of how the set lists have been, all roads lead to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They could have played the worst show I've ever heard this summer and be like, I don't care. I'm going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm going to go celebrate these guys. So it would be cool to get out there and have that moment. Obviously, you have to be a band for so long before you can even be acknowledged by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a nominee. So yeah, the band has been around for a long amount of time, long enough to have the nomination and now to be a soon to be inductee. But there's a lot more joy to be had as a fan of the band and for the band too, to just celebrate themselves. I mean, come on.
Yes.
These guys have earned it.
Celebrate yourselves.
Yeah.
Yes. I hope that they remember to do that. Like, I hope that, because that's hard because you feel like with those feelings like, oh, I'm being, I can't think of the word right now, but like, you're not supposed to think so fondly of yourself all of the time. But like, also, I hope you just realize, if I'm speaking to the band right now, as if they're listening to this podcast, hey, they do know about the podcast. They tag me and stuff. So if I can speak to the band for a second, and I don't want to, but if I can, I just hope that you realize they do. I know that they realize, but just the impact that they've made on this planet and on the people on the planet and for future generations, for past, for present, and for future. And so I hope that you remember to applaud yourself, because this hard work was hard work. We know that. We know that this has not been easy, and a lot of things have come and gone, and you've lost friends and so much time, but we are just so appreciative for everything that you have given to us. So that's my message.
I love it.
So talk about the posters behind you. I know exactly what one of them is. And I want to say I know what two of them is, because I want to say I was at the one with, is it a crow that's to your left or to your right? Or is it a blackbird?
Yep.
I can't think of what kind of bird. Yeah. Tell us about that poster.
It's a crow or a raven. I've got a few hanging on my wall here. I chose prints that were special to me. I think this one I just chose because it was horizontal and I needed a horizontal one, to be honest.
Oh, yeah,
but it's still a really good poster. Yeah. But for everybody who's listening, I'll try to describe them, and then everyone who's watching can actually see. Over my right shoulder, you've got Raleigh 2021. That's the first show back from quarantine, from COVID. So what an important show to represent on the wall. It's the first James Flames I think I ever bought, and it just represents what that show was. I got to say, I love how no matter what podcast you're listening to, people always bring up the Raleigh show. I think it's got to be one of the top 5 just most important shows that the band has ever played. Not even touching set lists, not touching what personnel were on stage. I think that's one of the most important shows that the band has ever played. Right behind me, I have Summerfest 2014. It's the kind of the reminiscent of the Under the Table and Dreaming album with the swings. And it's definitely a poster that's sought after now simply because it looks like that album cover. Deer Creek 2021, Ben Kwok. It's probably my favorite poster they've ever put out. Also an incredible set list if you want to go check out what they played that night. But that was one
I have to say, I feel like such, and I'm gonna use all the words I can. I feel like such a dodo asking if that was a crow when I know good and fucking well that it was a raven, but it just came out of my mouth and instantaneously I was like,
Yeah, there you go. The crow, the raven. I mean, you can really call it whatever you'd like
oh,
there.
there's a song called Raven. There's nothing about crows.
Yeah. And then you won't be able to really see everything else here, but I've got the Wrigley Field Ivy print from night 2, 2010. The same print that I bought at that show, Camping Out on the Rail. That's on my wall. My
Dude,
first Gorge show was the Caravan in 2011. Again, I really hit the ground running with the band after Wrigley Field. So I made my way to the Gorge in 2011 after I'd only been going to shows for 3 summers. And then on the far side, I've got the red van from the Charlottesville show, the 2016
Dude, yes.
25th anniversary show. So a lot of important prints to me, and some pretty important prints that kind of represent the band's career too. So
Yeah.
a lot of good ones up there.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for just spending an hour with us tonight, just kind of, reminiscing about old times with the band and how that's kind of led us up to where we all are now, making TikToks and doing podcasts and still traveling to see this band that we love so much, and that we're just so excited for all of the good energy that's kind of flowing around the fans, but also this band who's getting to do incredible things still after 30 years of making music. It's impressive. It's impressive. It's impressive. Like I'm so impressed by this band, and I just want to make sure that it goes down in time. So I'm doing the same thing as you. Just we're making sure that this is documented for all time. So guys, again, if you were just listening to this on a podcast app, be sure to listen to it to watch it on YouTube, because that's where you're going to get to see these prints that Alex has shown us. And so be sure to follow me on social media. The Space Between now has a page. So we grew a lot really quickly. And so I had to kind of merge from a group to a page, but that's not really a smooth transition on Facebook. So if you're part of the group, hey, be sure to head over to the page and like it, follow it, because that's where I'm trying to merge to. And then if you're on Instagram, it's simply under the Space Between _POD. And then on TikTok, it's simply just the Space Between podcast. So, and do all of the things that your 14, 15, 30-year-olds, we know how to do this. When you go onto YouTube, you got to like it and subscribe to the channel. That way they know that you're watching, and all of those statistics and analytics, they all really matter, just so that we know that this is working and that we're reaching people, again, just to document the Dave Matthews Band. So as I always say, guys, peace, love, and Dave Matthews Band. And thank you, Alex.